Please give it up for Adam Ross, everyone. Adam, come on up here.
All right, Adam.
Hey. Good evening. Just a few months ago, I stepped off a plane in Cuba looking for the father I never really knew. And I held in my hand a picture of my father that was taken in Cuba roughly in 1959. In that picture, well, actually, it wasn't a picture in my hand, it was my phone, because nobody carries pictures around, but, but it was still in my hand. And in that picture was my father and two men signing papers at a desk. And those two men were one of Cuba's leading bat biologists, literally the Batman, and Fidel Castro, which was interesting. So the backstory to that is that my father and the Batman and Fidel Castro were signing papers so that my father and the Batman could get the exclusive rights to mine and export bat guano from Cuba to America. So if you don't know what bat guano is, it is bat shit, which is why this story will sometimes sound a little batshit crazy as I go on. And bat guano is mined by hand from deep in bat caves underground, and then is very valuable as an organic fertilizer, especially back then. They probably didn't have all the chemicals we have, so if you think about it, it's a great way to make money. But my father's gold mine turned to a literal shit mine very quickly when Fidel Castro privatized all the he nationalized all the private companies that have been owned mostly by Americans in Cuba and threw the Americans out on short notice. So my father had to go back to Chicago, where he came from, and that is where, about 7 or so years later, he would eventually meet my mother. Now, the part that's really crazy about this story is that I didn't know that this man, whose nickname is Buddy, was my father until I was 17 years old. You see, until then, I thought my father was the man my mom had been married to when I was born, the man who raised me. But when I was 17, she revealed the secret. And it was yeah, right? It was like, wow, okay, Mom. But I adjusted to it and decided once all the dust settled, that I really wanted to, get to know this guy, Buddy, because he had offered to marry my mother when she told him she was pregnant with me, but she turned him down and stayed with the man that she was already married to, long story. And that's how, the story was never known. But when I tried to contact Buddy through my mother, he said he didn't want to have anything to do with me. And that hurt. It wasn't the worst hurt because I still had my dad, but it felt like I was being rejected. And over time that went away, but it would always come back in the middle of my brain somewhere, every couple years, until Buddy finally passed away about 20 years ago, and then I just realized, well, that's it. It's just going to be unfinished business. Now, over the years, I did come to discover that Buddy actually had a total of 6 children we knew about with 6 different women. Yeah, I don't know how you say baby daddy in Yiddish, but whatever that is what he was. And most of us didn't know about each other. And it was actually a comfort to discover that we were all, kind of in it together, and most of us in the dark. And we became friends on Facebook, and I've talked to a few of them over the years, and we stay in touch like that, all but one of them, who also recently passed away. And it was on Facebook that I found this picture on one of those half-brothers' Facebook wall of Buddy and Fidel Castro and the Batman. And at first I didn't really, think too much about it other than this is really interesting, and showed some friends. But then I learned actually almost a year ago now, that the Batman in Cuba was still alive. And that's when I realized I have to go. It didn't hurt that Obama was opening up our ability to travel to Cuba. So I booked a ticket with some friends, and off I went to Cuba, and there I am stepping off that plane. I ended up meeting the Batman at the museum that he worked at, and this guy is probably 80-something years old, his late 80s, and he is as young and vital and articulate as a 40-year-old man. I don't know what it is about their healthcare system over there, but it definitely actually works. Single pair, right? So we have this very wonderful yet strange conversation because he didn't even know that Buddy had all these children, nonetheless that I'm one of them. And he just goes on reminiscing about, my father Buddy, and their bat business and their friendship. And he told me how he really missed and loved my father. And he said, "Your father's a wonderful man." And I said, a wonderful man? Because, to me, I don't know how a man could leave his, 6 children around the world and not want to see most of them. I didn't know how he could, just really live the life he lived. So he was not a wonderful man to me. And the Batman said, the day your father had to leave the country, he showed up at my office with a briefcase. And in that briefcase was a lot of money. And I asked him what it was for. And he said, "This is a year's salary for all the miners," because he knew that they would get nothing once everyone had to leave the country. And I said, "No, I can't take it." And he said, "No, you have to." And he got on a plane and he left. And that's the kind of father, that's the kind of man your father was. I went to Cuba not knowing what I was looking for, but when I heard that story, I knew I'd found it, because in that moment, I found peace. Thank you.